Hello and welcome to another episode of Steelfur Speaks. I'm Steelfur, and this is Steelfur Speaks, is my podcast, where I talk about flesh and blood. I mean, that's just the whole thing. That's what we do. That's what we've been doing now for almost 5 years, maybe over 5 years, all coming up on 5 years in October, maybe. Yeah, Fab's pretty good, right? I'm super excited for Rosetta. Earth Hero is 100% my theme. Bit concerned about how much money it's going to take from me after I also bought a crap load of full art cards from Mysteria, but this is just, you know, how it's going to go. Hopefully the next set after this won't be so, you know, on theme for me. It seems like they're targeting my wallet directly, and I resent that, but this one looks like it's going to be fantastic. I'm really excited. I don't know what's going on here, but, you know, nature is very much my jam, so I'm kind of excited. Don't know if the preview emails have gone out yet. Don't think I have one. If they have, if they haven't, who knows? They are doing less previews this time, so maybe it's not going to be for me. What else is going on? It is Collector's Week. And it's just worth acknowledging that it is Collector's Week. They do have a print run update, which I think is kind of interesting. They've also like changed their reprint policy to explicitly say that rainbow foils are not going to be reprinted except as promos like a month after them. Let's just read exactly what they say specifically. Here we go. So a rainbow foil card included in a retail booster set will not be reprinted as a rainbow foil outside the original set it was released in, unless the reprint features new artwork. Exceptions to this are the purposes of organized play, marketing, or promotional use during the 12 months preceding and following the release of the booster set. For clarity, a rainbow foil card can be reprinted. So what does that mean? So that means, firstly, it says within its original set. So that means that if they do an additional wave of a set, so say they print Mysteria and they print 180,000 booster boxes, and then they decide actually we need another 50,000, we're bringing a new market in, etc., then they can reprint it as rainbow foil if they do another wave. Now, they're not keen on doing secondary waves of sets, but that's not to say that in the future they will never do a secondary wave, right? But they also give themselves a 12-month grace window both before and after the set releases to make a promo. So that's a full art promo. They might decide a card has become really popular and do a promo of it. You know, that gives them lots of room to make armory kits and do promos for callings and that kind of thing. So it's quite sensible. And then, of course, they can print it as a reprint, you know, without a foiling. So what that would look like is, say, putting Fate Foreseen in a future set, but not making it rainbow foil, just making it non-foil. That would make sense. Or they can, of course, print it with new artwork. You know, so if they decide to do fresh artwork, they can obviously do a rainbow foil version. And that's probably the best way that it needs to be handled, because obviously if they're printing a new artwork of a card, they're probably going to want it to be a rainbow foil. People are going to want that available in rainbow foil. If they're doing a new artwork like the Flick Flacks we got recently, people are going to want that promo in rainbow foil. Some won't, but most will. So it's kind of just important to understand that. The other thing we've had, of course, this week, aside from a few interviews, is a print run update. This was really interesting to me because those of you who follow my channel closely will know that it was years ago now. It was just before, let me remind myself, it was just before Dynasty came out, or just after Dynasty came out. I did a prediction on where I thought the set would grow if it did like exponential numbers or steady increases, and I'll put my hand up there and I'll fully admit that my prediction saw us reaching like 300,000, 400,000 booster boxes, and I'm genuinely way off, right? And there's a reason that I'm way off, and it's right here. Okay, so what we had before was essentially up to here, so we didn't have print numbers for Monarch Unlimited, we didn't have print runners for LA Unlimited, Everfest Unlimited hadn't been confirmed, and then we had print run numbers up to just before Dynasty, so we didn't have any of this either. So there was no way of knowing that they had printed 181,000 Monarch booster boxes for Unlimited, right? There was no way of knowing. Now, WTR is a bit different because they had to do a second print wave and a lot of people bought in. But there's a reason WTR Unlimited is still available right now. ARC was never as popular, so it makes sense there's less of it. But this number this number, oh, it's a bit painful. 88% increase from Crucible of War set size to Monarch. Right? 88%. And the last draft set, I mean, 101,000 more boxes. And this here, like this line right here is like, this is the maximum point of, we could call it the TCG hype. I guess it's here, isn't it? Yeah. So if we think, actually, if we do that, so this is the maximum point of the TCG hype wave. We've got COVID, we've got stimulus checks in America, we've got various other things, we've got people bored at home. We just have this massive, massive thing here. And, I mean, it's clear from these numbers, not being mean, not saying that it was the wrong thing to do, that LSS kind of bought into their own hype. And I think, as we've already called out in previous years, the supply chain, certainly the supply chain in America, is also partly responsible for this, because we know that they inflated the price of the set, right? They inflated the price of Monarch First Edition. They understood how much more of it there was compared to Crucible. They probably had backdoor rumblings that there was an unlimited version coming in as well. And this was inflated. And when you look at how much these were selling for, reprinting a load of this makes 100% sense. But then the second that this number proves to be fake, basically, not fake, this number proves to be like not as tight as you think, your game hasn't actually grown that much, then this number is really painful for the market to absorb. And you'll see why, and there's a valid reason why a lot of stores and players got incredibly burnt by this, and why a lot of stores and players dropped out of the game around Monarch, because you bought these first edition boxes at $1,000 for a case. They're not worth that now. And then there was this massive unlimited print run coming in. And these products are still available. I mean, these products are still available on the market. It's called LA because it's Elemental. Everyone calls it TOA, Tales of Aria. You know, these products are still widely available. So, you know, that's kind of the reason why, is there was just a ton of it printed. And you could even buy first edition Tales of Aria, which shows that the demand is still really not there. And this is quite good because it shows us where the demand for Flesh and Blood is right now. You know, it's funny. It's actually kind of funny because the game feels like there are more people playing it than there has ever been, right? Bigger tournaments, more competition, loads of armories online, new countries joining. You know, we could easily imagine that, like, Mist over here is actually like a sizable increase because they build in the entire market. And you're kind of asking, well, how many boxes do you need to print to do, you know, to do the Japanese market? There's a question. How many boxes do you need to print to do the Japanese market? Because we know that there is a separate print run for Japan. So, you know, how many boxes do you think that is? Like 50,000, 100,000? Probably not 100,000. But you could easily see that being like 50,000 just in there. So what does that mean? We're up to like, you know, are we up to a number like 225,000 now? Because that's still not above what Tales of Aria was, right? That's kind of interesting. Just in terms of boxes printed, you know? So it's kind of interesting that you think the game is growing quite well. And I certainly do still view the game as growing quite well. I mean, over here on the side, we did our calculation for growth in print, growth in player numbers. Let's just go over there. You know, and we had this notion that we looked at the number of players that were on the armories. We saw lifetime player count reach 46,000 with a growth figure of like 8,000 per set. We saw the 90-day player increase. Are these still correct? They are. Roughly increasing like by 20% every time there was a set. So if we think that, You know, if we think, you know, after Dynasty, we would have, what came after Dynasty? Outsiders. Yeah, Outsiders, Evo, Heavy, Mysteria, right? So we just do Outsiders, Evo, let's do it this way. Outsiders, Evo, Heavy, Mysteria, right? So if we just work it out like this, so really what we're going to say is that this number increases by 20% every time there is a draft set release. So that was 1 or whatever it was. But we'll say this is going up by 20%, right? So let's just do that. And if that happens, because historically, and I did work it out for over a long period of time, historically the player count went up 20%, 90-day XP every time there was a release, right? So we can do that. We can take this and we can, what do? We add it to the same number multiplied by this number. That works. And actually, why don't we just, if we just lock this, that'll be easier. So if you put, this is turning into an Excel lesson, but if you put number signs after that, you can kind of lock it to that. So then I don't need these boxes. We're just going to say this 20% growth for all these sets, drag that down. And then what I want to do is just change this to that. Change this to that. And just do it that way. What's gone wrong there? This is supposed to be... So this is that by this times 20 to give us our outsiders figure. Oh, that's why. We don't need these anymore, do we? We just need to do it this way. That's fine. It's almost like I do know how to do this. I've just been working all day on something similar, so I'm quite tired. Right, so that'll increase that by 20%. That will increase that by 20%. Okay, cool. And then we could theoretically just drag down and delete the zeros. So, like, look, this is roughly a projection. And I don't know how it changed after Evo, but roughly after every draft set came out, so draftable set, there was a 20% increase. And after every supplemental set, there was a 0% increase. It was one of the reasons, at least in my opinion, they scrapped the supplemental sets, is that they didn't bring in new players. They didn't help people get into the game. So we could be on a figure of like 33,000 90-day XP now-ish. That's quite a big increase. You know, if you think about 2021, we're on 6,000. This is in 2022. We're on, you know, 15,000. So we could be there. Like, but does that mean then that people are buying less? I think that is a trend that I personally acknowledge, and I think that that is probably something that did change potentially, you know, around UPR. Is a lot of people, because we talk about for a long time about the rise of the specialist, right? Now, if the game really has gone up, you know, if this projection is true and the game did continue its growth curve and we've really gone up, you know, how many thousands? 207% since Dynasty. Well, the print run numbers we've got, you know, they don't really reflect the same curve, right? We're actually had a massive drop, so the player base is still absorbing this. Still buying these cards quite cheaply, still absorbing this huge backlog. Hell, I was given Tales of Aria boosters at my armory this week because the person had some boxes they needed to get rid of and no one was buying them, right? So that's still happening. But if we had that idea, you know, and the player base is growing at, I mean, what, this is a 3.55% increase over the previous set from Outsiders to Dust to Dawn. And maybe they didn't print as much Dust to Dawn as they wanted because, you know, it's a supplemental set. But if we kept growing by 3.55%, you can see that we're still only get to, what, 200,000 boxes. You know, and I think this is kind of interesting because if we did that as a calculation of like, you know, boxes per players, and we take, you know, this figure from over here. So what do we have? We have, yeah, let's just do that. So we'll do boxes per player. We can take like Uprising, Dynasty, Outsiders, Evo, etc. We'll just plot those in there. What are you doing to me? You're supposed to just copy and paste. You may or may not have noticed, but I don't actually use... this is Google Files, so I don't really use that most of the time. I am very much a... How do I paste numbers? What? I swear, these people are... Insert... Edit, paste special, values only. Okay, so what did we say? We said we're not doing Dust to Dawn. This is UPR. That's Dynasty. That's Outsiders. Evo. What's the shortcut for this? Paste special. Control Shift V. Cool. Oh, thank you for your patience. I swear we're getting somewhere in the end, right, with our Excel simulator. And for any audio listeners, basically what I'm doing is just doing some maths to work out, you know, if the player projections are correct, then where does that actually leave us on player numbers, right? Because, you know, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. Okay, cool. So number of players, so let's just divide that by this. People are going to get triggered now because that's the wrong way around. And these are in the wrong place. Ba, 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 ba. That's a faulty reference. So let's just fix that. So you can kind of see what I'm trying to get at here, which is that the number of boxes per player actually, you know, if say for example the growth rate between Outsiders and Dust to Dawn was maintained, so there was 3.5% growth per set, the number of boxes per player would kind of drastically drop, and we'd go from 13 boxes per player in Uprising to 6 boxes per player in Mist, which kind of mirrors the narrative that we're talking about in terms of people becoming specialists, people buying 1 to 2 classes instead of buying every class. And that kind of is backed up if you think about it in terms of this sort of projection. Now, there are other ways we could project. You know, we could project some sort of compound growth where, you know, they're growing at this much, but every set is growing at this much. Probably not. I mean, but we could also project that, you know, the growth is additive, where it's like we grow 3.5% and then we grow another 3%, so we grow 6% for the next set. But, you know, it's impossible for us to know that. We'll look back at this in the future and we'll say, hey, how wrong I was, just like I did this time. But it is interesting because, you know, if we even looked at, say, these 3 sets, right? Under a more sort of aggressive forecast, you could see that the boxes per player, you know, still stays quite high, right? So you actually get 8.67 rather than dropping down to 6. And if you had a more aggressive thing, but realistically, I think, you know, if we do this kind of work, we can kind of have a prediction of where the player base is. If it's really here, that will be fantastic. I doubt it's successfully continued to grow 20% every single time a draft set has come out. There is probably like a fall off or a plateau here. You know, I could easily see 10% growth, and I think that is quite interesting. And I think that would also have a massive impact as well if we just change these to be updating. You can kind of see that, you know, any change in the growth numbers of the players drastically affects the amount of boxes available per I've done that wrong. Drastically affects the amount of boxes available per player, right? Because you're printing this many boxes. You know, so we don't really know. Really, is really what I'm trying to say, is that we haven't really got a clear consensus because we don't have a fact basis for these player numbers. And if you think about attendance at large events, they haven't necessarily gone up, right? So there's not more conversion to like the Pro Tour. If we think about the number of people who say, let's just check that for a second. So I mean, we can pull this out here. Someone on Reddit did it. 395 players in Pro Tour Amsterdam. Pro Tour Lille, which obviously was a few years ago, had 354. So there was an increase of 40 players. You know, the qualifications through ELO kind of stayed the same, so that number wouldn't change. But that does mean that 40 people, you know, 40 additional people qualified via ProQuests, and you know, obviously there'll be a lot that didn't show up, but my point is that's like a steady growth figure. So I don't think 20% is a realistic number to apply there, but I do think the game is still growing. I think the game is still growing. More people are showing up at competitive level events, and I feel like the game is still in a very healthy place. I feel like, so my takeaway from this on the numbers, and I'll close up this point here and just finish up with some other stuff. My takeaway here on the numbers is just that this was a mistake, right? You know, Crucible's fine. Monarch and Tales of Aria were just a mistake. There was too much hype in the TCG market. You buy into it too much. Your distributors aren't being honest with you because they see it as a cash cow and they're like, give me more because I think I can sell it at inflated prices. They push the prices up, so you think the demand is there when really it's people inflating demand through, you know, hoarding product that they don't actually want. They're trying to make money out of. Flesh and Blood is seen as that it is cash cow. You print unlimited to try and solve that problem, but then the wave of first edition is actually realized how much there is. And that's where you end up. Ellie's already been committed to the printers, so you have to follow through with that. And then you start to slowly correct and get to a place. And of course, we also have the advent of Fab 2.0 that comes in here. You know, with UPR, and things start to get good, right? You adjust and things start to get better. And I think when we get the numbers maybe next year for some of the Evo Heavy and Mist, I think you will see this continued consistent growth. There's probably a big spike for Mist when Japan comes in. My pronunciations are terrible today. And probably continues for Rosetta. I wouldn't even be surprised if we hit maybe over 200,000 here. But until there's some sort of publication of player numbers, it's very hard to understand what that looks like for people buying like the product. But I do think my initial instinct is correct, that a lot of people are doing what I'm doing. And I'll just remind you for a second, you know, I have a big spreadsheet myself where I'm deliberately choosing what heroes I'm going to buy into and what heroes I'm going to sell. You know, and actually, even if we think about it, once Rosetta was announced, I moved Illusionist just a full no. Like, I originally was like, well, I'm going to collect Enigma because I want to play my Marvel cards for Thing a lot. But actually, after doing all of that analysis, the conclusion was I don't want Illusionist anymore. And actually, I might buy into Assassin again, but I'm happy leaving that as a red, and I'm happy moving Verdance into a yes, because she's Earth, and I'm happy putting Florian as a yes, and I'm happy, but the other thing is I'm happy to get rid of Vincent, right? So Vincent is going to move to a no. I actually don't want Shadow Runeblades in my collection. I don't like Shadow at all, so I won't be maintaining that class, and if any Shadow heroes come out, I won't be maintaining that either. So I'll be able to sell all my Shadow cards, including Carrion Husk, etc. I'll be keeping the Earth, you know, 3 Earth heroes, Florian, Verdance, Briar. And, you know, every time a new set comes out, or every time I see a new hero I might be interested in, I revisit this sheet, and I use it to control my spending. Right, and I can share a link if people want, but the point is, I feel like it's not just me that's doing this. I know people who are specialist mains of specific heroes. Maybe people aren't doing it as complex as I am because they don't approach problems like this. I approach problems like this. But, you know, I know a lot of people who are brute mains, ninja mains. They have 1 or 2 classes, and I feel like that's become the norm. Whereas if you even came to me 3 years ago, I think a lot of people would have maintained a whole collection. The fact is, when you're doing 4 sets a year with multiple playable classes, 30 playable heroes, you do not have the time to play all of those classes and heroes. So it just makes sense to not invest as heavily. And I think that's the takeaway from the printer and numbers that I can take after a bit of faffing around. I think that's where I line up. That everything I can see on the projections is the print run numbers are growing steadily and slowly. The big change is a reduction in the number of collectors, and the big change is the reduction in the number of people buying multiple cases, collecting every hero and every class. That doesn't mean there's less players of the game. It doesn't mean the game is growing less slowly because of the number of print run numbers. And I also, just for clarity, LSS has expanded, but all of the indications from what they told us, and they told the big business publication they did a TV interview with in New Zealand, and I did an analysis of that, is that LSS is capital positive. So what that means is that despite all the new hires, you know, they are still making profit from the amount that they're printing. So they don't need to try and sell 6-7 sets a year to fund the number of employees they have or the international expansion into Japan, because they funded that with capital they had available, which means they're making enough money to continue building a war chest, probably pay dividends out to their investors, and generally running a healthy, slow, organic growth business. All they really need to do to be successful is harden up the new player pipeline, which they're doing with things like Armory decks, First Strike decks, get people in, and then get them a good pathway to building their first CC deck. And that might end up being their only CC deck, right? If someone buys an Aura First Strike deck, then buys some Rosetta, builds an Aura CC deck, and that is their only CC deck that they bring out until she's Living Legend, and then they play something else, some other Lightning, Runeblade, some other Runeblade, that's fine. That is the game being healthy. Unhealthy is people overextending themselves to collect every single card and then having to sell the cards rapidly to try and recoup some money. Unhealthy is, you know, collectors buying the only available copy of, you know, Traverse the Universe and driving the price up so that normal people can't afford it to play in tournaments. You know, all these things are unhealthy. Fab 2.0, 3.0 as I call it, with the big improvements in art design, set design, and in my opinion, fun, you know, that came with heavy hitters. Really, I think we are in a very, very good place with Fab, and I think the numbers reinforce that for me. I want a game that has steady growth without actually having to print tons more SKUs to try and generate revenue. I want a game that is happy generating steady revenue without seeing the need to drive up, you know, oh, we need 10% margin increase per year. You know, all indications are that Fab is growing steadily and strongly. And since it's, of course, not publicly owned, it doesn't continually have to answer to very aggressive shareholders who want to know what the next big plan is to drive the stock price up. So it's, you know, things are good. That's my take on Collectors Week. Things are good. I am no longer a Fab collector, I would say. I sold my Grail 2 weeks ago at Pro Tour Amsterdam. That was my Rainbow Foil EA Spring Tunic. I got paid a decent amount of money for it. I'm not going to say how much, but that's fine. It definitely isn't how much it was worth on Card Market or anything like that, because there aren't a lot of buyers in the market right now. So ultimately, the price was what someone was willing to pay, and I was happy to take it because, you know, I'm saving for a house and I've got bills to pay, and I got a dog. Yeah. I don't have any photos of the dog on my computer, but I got a dog. I bought a dog with some of that money, so I turned a Fab card into a dog. That's kind of a win, I think. I am now the owner of a 4-month-old corgi, tricolor corgi puppy. You can see photos on my Twitter. She's gorgeous. She's lovely. She's quiet. She's obedient. Very emotionally engaged. I'm now getting up at 7:30 in the morning every day to walk my dog. It's pretty good. Life's pretty nice. I genuinely have no complaints. And if that means I can't spend as much money on Fab, or, you know, I've sold out of Star Wars Unlimited, and I've sold out, I'm probably selling my Altered Kickstarter when it comes in, and, you know, any of the other TCGs I've bought into over the years, like Lorcana, it's all gone. The only real ones I have left are Lord of the Rings TCG, which I'm thinking about selling out of, but it's slow burn. Genesis, which no one is buying, and I have too much of from when I thought it would take off and I thought it would be fun. And I also bought too much into the TCG hype. I've said that before on the channel. I bought into TCG hype myself during the whole Monarch period. It cost me money. It was a mistake. And I have Lord of the Rings, Genesis. Well, I also have like Netrunner and Arkham Horror and stuff like that. That doesn't really count. I have a little bit of Magic, but that's almost all sold now. I have one Commander deck left and some precons, but the rest of it's all gone. I'm generally just decluttering, de-board gaming my life, trying to focus back on the things that I actually want to play and will play on a regular basis. It's not to say I don't see myself playing Star Wars Unlimited or something like that every now and then. If there's a big tournament, I'll hit up my tree, I'll see who I can borrow a deck from, or I'll buy a cheap deck that I can play at that event and have some fun. But the days of me like hoarding tons and tons of money. That being said, I put that firmly hands up when Rosetta comes out. If there are some EA, if there's some EA stained glass Earth cards, for example, I'll be there. But I will wait until the market settles down to buy them, because as Mist has shown us, once that season ended, the prices crashed, and you should have just waited a bit and bought singles a month later. You would have got everything at a decent price, because that's what Fab is now. Reasonably priced playables, some shiny stuff that costs a bit more. But, you know, I mean, even if we looked at, say, for example, you know, the card market, I don't want Cardi B, I want card market, one second. You know, if we look at the price of something like New, this has held up quite well. If we look at the price of something like Zen, Tamer of Purpose, Marvel, you know, that's dropped about £40 from what it was pre-Nats, and there's even one sold for 85. Yikes. But then if you look at stuff like singles, like Chase the Tail, which was, I think, £10 pre-Nats, guess what? It's not that expensive anymore. Persuasive Prognosis, that was £8 or £9, £5 now. What about Levels? That was the big one. Okay, Levels is still expensive, but it's played in all three heroes, so it's still kind of worth the value. What was the other one? Weakest Link. That's probably still worth a fair bit of money. So there you go. So my basic thesis for these sets, which is buy the generics and the ones that everyone plays early and buy them often, and wait on class cards to see where the market settles. Right, that's the thing. This has been a finance chat for Collectors Week. I hope you are having fun and enjoying your Fab collection, whatever it looks like. Whether it's big, whether it's small, whether you have one or two cards you love, whether you have just a playable collection of no shiny stuff ever, and you just really enjoy being able to build those decks that you have. You don't have to have Marvels and E8s and stuff. That can be a treat to yourself if you really want it down the line. There's no rush. Just enjoy the game your way. Collecting or not, it's fine. Yeah. It's great. I'm Steelfur Speaks. Enjoy Fab. It's a great time. The game's great. Genuinely. The next set looks like a bomb, and I'm not just saying that because I'm Earth biased. I think it's going to be some really interesting design. I think the split cards just look really cool, and I really want to see what happens there. Yeah. I'm not going to talk about Skirmish because I have tons of thoughts about Skirmish season and Blaze, and I've kind of already given them all the previous episode. So we're just all steam ahead for Rosetta now. I'm just really keen on it. And those print run numbers were interesting. So I hope you enjoyed this discussion. As always, if you have questions, comments, do just leave them at the bottom. I'll get back to them when I can. Like and subscribe to the video. Loads of people don't. And it really makes me feel good when people hit that button. So yeah, talk to you all soon.